He's currently a Unison member, but actually he's formerly was an NUM activist, and obviously during the Great Miners' Strike of 1984-85. But also he was from Silverwood Colliery, and also obviously that's an industry where actually the importance of just transitions and the climate emergency is particularly pressing. So over to you, Ian.
Thanks very much. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm sorry I couldn't join the conference. I've just enjoyed the contributions. I hope I can add to the debate. First and foremost, what I want to say, I want to just dump a couple of misconceptions that, as people know, it's 40 years since we went out on strike, where we fought tooth and nail to defend us as jobs and as communities, and with the anniversary there's been a growth in interest of what took place there. That's reflected in a number of documentaries that have been on TV, newspaper articles, things online, etc, etc. One of the things that has come up a couple of times is somehow that the closure of the coal industry was to do with protecting the climate. Now, I just want to dump that. Now, the person that came out with that in 2021 were Boris Johnson, when he was on a visit in Moray, and came out with his statement. This is an absolute nonsense. Before I go on to say about it's an absolute nonsense, the other thing is that I want to remind people, because I think people, it is a long time ago. We used to have a union paper called the Miner, every monthly paper, just like most unions do. We used to cover a wide range of articles. One of the articles in the early 80s, we started talking about how we could help against, basically clean coal. We talked about scrubbing power stations, etc, etc. Now, that's all not going to happen, is it? The environmentalist George Monbiot said clean coal is an oxymoron, and I completely agree with him. I'm not here to advocate opening coal mines and burning coal. But it's important to mention that because trade unions have always had a contribution, have always had a voice in terms of making the world a better place. And it's important to understand people who were actually involved in creating carbon and contributing to the crisis, we were kind of aware of that, and we were conscious of that, and in his own way we were trying to address that. But the real reason why Margaret Thatcher went to war with the miners and the communities, and therefore the rest of the working class, wasn't to do with, as I've said, wasn't to do with anything that was to smash one of the strongest trade unions in Britain and therefore take everybody else on. The reason she wanted to do that is because she was trying to address what previous governments had tried to address, and is that how they could make British industry more profitable and therefore shift the profits in terms of create more profits, and unions were seen as a barrier to that. And there, the free market policies that came after the miners' strike have borne that out. In terms of the privatisation of the NHS, the privatisation of public services, have these all been positive for society? No, they haven't. They've been detrimental. So in us losing, everybody lost. The other thing that comes out that I want to address from the miners' strike is somehow it was like, yeah, we put up a good fight, but it was inevitable that we would lose. That is also nonsense. There's reasons why we lost. But it's worth referring back to one of Margaret Thatcher's lieutenants at the time, a guy called Norman Tebbit, who, in various cabinet papers that have been released over the last 10-15 years, he described it as a close-run thing. Even in her own memoirs, Margaret Thatcher talks about the frustration that they faced trying to beat us. The resistance that we put up towards them scared the hell out of them. And this is what they're scared of. This is what the bosses are scared of, and various governments are scared of. is resistance to what they're trying to do. And there's no greater battle now than trying to defend the climate. So we have to basically, and the planet, I mean, I can't believe, you know, I grew up in a time when I saw rivers polluted and then become clean, and now they're polluted again. I'm 66 years old. I can't believe how bad the rivers are, because they've just been literally pouring raw sewage into rivers, right? Making the environment much more unpleasant. And then obviously the impact on the rest of the world is just immense. So in terms of the resistance, that is I just want to mention that there's no way, and I think I did a meeting in the same room to Liz's Unison branch. There's no way that we could have stood out for 12 months, right, on our own. We had fantastic support. We had support from other trade unionists. We had support from in terms of our communities. One of the group of people that played a central role was the Women Against Pit Closure, which was formed, much to the disgust of Margaret Thatcher. We were hoping to use the women to get onto the men to try getting back to go back to work. We had people in terms of like the communities that I come from. Some of them, yeah, some of us were progressive, but some of us had ideas such as, you know, in terms of like questions about homosexuality. You had the growth of the formation of the Gays and Lesbians Support the Minors that came about. I recently did a meeting where I shared a platform where a guy who was in the Asian Youth Movement in Sheffield, those guys made links with pivots around Rotherham and Sheffield, and because they knew that the police brutality that we were suffering, trying to beat us back to work, they suffered on a daily basis. At the end of the strike, we marched back to work. The majority of us were still out on strike, despite not a penny in pay for 12 months. We didn't even get benefits because part of the government plan was to deny the strikers benefits. So the only way we could feed ourselves and feed our families was by the support and solidarity. A couple of things in terms of the height of the solidarity is when dock workers walked out, when other groups of workers like rail workers refused to move coal. This was really how we could have actually beat them. And the defiance, just on its own, again, the close run thing that Tevitt talks about, that is the truth, right? So when we look back at those days, we have to look at who's responsible. I'll finish on this, right? I will never, and people who took part in that, never regret what we did. Never regret that we stood up and fought and we resisted Margaret Thatcher. And today I'm heartened by seeing people fighting back to try and defend the planet in terms of the climate movement. I'm heartened by seeing people time and time on the streets demanding that the genocide in Palestine stops now. You know, there's something taking place inside, and we have to link all those movements with the workers' movement and basically say that resistance is not futile. It's the only way that we're going to change things and bring about a world where people are put first before profits. Because the people that run the world are killing the world. And I'll just finish on Greta Thunberg. You know, when she spoke at the 2021, I think it was a youth conference to do with the environment, and she did the blah, blah, blah speech, right? And it is the case, isn't it? It's like blah, 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 that's all we get from politicians. And we get sometimes blah, blah, blah from his own trade union leaders. And they're the real reason, at the end of the day, why the miners were left isolated, because the TUC did not come together and get fully foursquare behind us to bring about a victory that could have changed the political landscape forever. And it would have been a much better world than the one that we live in. Thank you.